Okay, witches. So this is it. This is going to be... So this is going to be an introduction to the blood moon ritual. First of all, thank you all for joining into the ritual. Thank you all for participating in this ritual. It will hopefully be a rewarding experience for you and get you pointed in the right direction with your magic, okay? So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this. I hope that you all are excited too. And in this video, I'm basically just going to give a simple introduction to the ingredients that you'll need to gather and sort of just cover that topic, basically. An introduction to the ingredients. So first of all, you can modify certain aspects of this ingredients list, but other certain aspects of it you need to keep. And I will explain that as I go along, okay? So first of all, I recommend that you write down the ritual in your own grimoire. And also, by the way, I will be sending an email with all of this written down for y'all. But I wanted to go ahead and do this video real quick first because I want y'all to know the ingredients list that you need to go ahead and hurry up and gather before the eclipse happens. So that's top priority. Gather these materials first. But I'm going to send an email with the full ritual written so that you can write it down yourself in your grimoire or print it out or whatever and have it saved and documented for yourself. But yes, so first of all, you're going to need some pennies. You don't need this many, but you need at least 4 pennies to use in this ritual, okay? So that's one of the ingredients. Another ingredient is you need a bag. This is an interchangeable ingredient. You could either have a bag that you use for the main thing to hold your spell in, or you can use a jar. Personally, I'm going to use a jar. So I have this jar. You know, it's not too big, it's not too small. But this is the jar that I'm using for the ritual. But you could alternatively use a bag to put all these different things in, which I will explain that in a moment. So those, you know, that's going to be like what you put all of the ingredients in when you're casting the spell, and it's going to be the remains of the spell that you just keep. And so long as you have that, the spell will be intact. If you want to break the spell, what you will do is you will destroy the bag or the jar. But we'll get into that later as well. Okay, the next ingredient that you will need is a garnet stone. So this is just a piece of raw garnet that has sort of been polished. This is what I'm going to be using, and this is going to be a key ingredient to the ritual and the spell as well. Sort of the stone will be one of the binding agents that the spell is bound to, okay? So you're going to need a piece of garnet crystal. And as you can see, it doesn't have to be fancy. This is not a very high quality or fancy or, you know, fancy cut garnet. It's just, you know, rather plain raw piece. So alternatively though, you could use another thing that I actually am going to use is this ring that has a garnet stone in it. You can't really see the red coloring with the lighting, but that's also going to be sort of what I bind my spell to. Alternatively, if you don't have garnet or you can't get a hold of garnet, carnelian is a little bit more easier to get a hold of. So this is like a red carnelian crystal. And this is interchangeable. If you can't get a hold of garnet, I do recommend garnet for the key stone. But if you can't get a hold of it, carnelian will be a suitable substitute. Okay. And further, you know, you could use red jasper, red coral, any red colored stone pretty much would be suitable for this, but garnet is the ideal, okay? So that's very much a key ingredient to the spell. Okay, another key ingredient that you will need to have is large stones. It does not really matter what these stones are. If I can get the camera to focus better. This is a piece of flint, but once again, it does not matter what the large stones that you choose are, but you will need 13 total of these large stones. You want them to be at least palm-sized, okay? The whole point of the stones, the reason why it doesn't matter what kind they are, is because these stones, you're choosing them for how heavy they are. You're choosing them for the weight, okay? That is vital to this ritual and to this spell. It's a vital part of it. Okay, so this is a big piece of petrified wood. That's also going to be one of the stones that I use in this ritual. And then I have this other large piece. I'm not sure if this is petrified wood or not, or some kind of, I'm really not sure what this is, but when I saw it in nature, it just appealed to me. So this is going to be one of the other stones that I use. So as you can see, they're all quite large. I do have other stones already, but I still need to gather some too. But these are the ones that I just chose to show you as an example. You need 13 large stones, large rocks, for their weight, okay? And so this is why I had said this ritual does require a little bit of labor, because, you know, you have to go out and collect big rocks like this, 13 of them, okay? And this is a key part of the ritual as well, so don't skip this, and you can't change this. You know, don't gather tiny pebbles or anything. Make sure that they are large rocks like this, okay? That's very important, because what you have with this is basically you're going to end up taking these stones and burying them in, you know, a shallow, small grave as an offering to the spirits. And what's going to happen through this ritual is that the spirits will take the weight and the gravity of these heavy rocks, and through the witchcraft, through the ritual, this energy contained in the weight and the gravity of these stones will be given to the spirits, so they can use that much force to do physical things, okay? Do physical phenomena in the world, all right? And tasks for you. So this is a transference, as far as this part of the ritual with the 13 stones. This is a transference of that mass, that volume, that weight, that gravity, that energy over to the spirits, okay? So you will be having to dig a hole. That is another thing that I was talking about, where this ritual does involve a little bit of labor and work, but, you know, it's worth it, okay? Another thing that you will need is graveyard dirt. You will need quite a bit of it, so make sure that you gather some up before the ritual. This is actually from a graveyard where one of my deceased relatives is buried. So you might want to do that. If you know, if you have any deceased relatives, you might want to go get dirt from their grave in particular, or alternatively from the crossroads in the cemetery. Okay, so just in any cemetery, or at a cemetery where one of your loved ones is buried, or even just a family friend that you were close with, you know, go to the crossroads there and gather some dirt from the side of the crossroads, okay? That'll be important, and make sure that you get quite a bit of it, because you will be needing a lot of it in the spell. And that is also a key ingredient, so make sure that you do that. So another key ingredient is the candles. You will need 3 white candles or 3 black candles. Personally, I'm going to use these black ones because it just fits with the energy more to me. But white is largely an all-purpose color, so you could use white. Alternatively, you could use 3 red candles, but in either case, you will need 3 candles, and you will need them to be, you know, this kind: taper candles, chime candles, or votive candles, or pillar candles. I do recommend that you use this kind though, just a small, simple taper candle, because you're not going to burn these candles all the way. They're just going to burn during the ritual, and then you will also be burying these in the same hole that you bury the stones in. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a big elaborate, you know, pillar candle or anything. Just simple 3 candles like this will be fine. So that's another key ingredient that you cannot replace. Okay. Another key ingredient that I'm not going to show on here is an object linked to yourself. So you're going to need, you know, your fingernails, your hair, your saliva, or your blood. That will be required in this ritual. It could be any one of those, but you're basically going to be putting that into the bag or the jar with the other ritual paraphernalia, as well as the dirt. Some of this dirt will be going into your spell jar or spell bag as well. Okay, so now, actually one more thing that is a key ingredient is water. I recommend that you use fresh spring water, okay, because that contains the most vital energy. So I'm using Ozarka water. Okay, and I almost forgot, another key ingredient is necromancy oil. You will need some kind of necromancy oil for this ritual. I did post a video on my YouTube channel of how I make this specific necromancy oil, which is what I'll be using. I'm going to have to make another batch of this because this is not enough. You will need quite a bit of it. So make sure that you make a batch of this, or purchase a large amount. I would say a bottle this size would be plenty for this ritual, you know, if it's full though. So I'm going to have to go ahead and add more oil to this. But I do have the instructions on how to make this oil on my YouTube channel. So you can go watch that video if you want to make this exact same oil as me. Or, like I said, you can come up with your own recipe, or, you know, find another recipe online and use that. Or you can alternatively just purchase some necromancy oil from somewhere to use in your rite. But this is a key ingredient. This is a necessary ingredient, okay? Alternatively, you could use an oil to a deity like Goddess Hecate, because she has an underworld rulership aspect. So if you don't want to use a necromancy oil in and of itself, you can use an oil that is to a deity that has underworld ties, okay? And that would be fine too. Okay, So now I'm moving on to the changeable ingredients. And basically this is just going to consist of what herbs you use. This is wormwood herb. This is what I'll be using. It has necromantic properties. It is associated with, you know, working with the dead. So that's what I'm using. And you will also need quite a bit of whatever herb you do choose to use. Another herb that is good is mugwort. Okay. Willow. If you have access to a willow tree, that would be very easy to just go and get the leaves off of it. You know, just collecting that in nature and for free. But if, you know, you don't, I do suggest that you go ahead and buy some wormwood or some mugwort herb if you don't have some on hand already. And that will be necessary to have quite a bit of it, because the reason why I want you to have quite a bit of whatever herb you're going to use, and also of the grave dirt. The reason why you will need, you know, a good amount of these two ingredients is because you're going to be scattering these in a ritual circle that you create. Okay? And that will be kind of large, so you want to make sure that you have enough to scatter all within the circle. Okay? Now, one other thing you might want to use, instead of using any herb at all, you could just alternatively use salt. So this is just a dish of salt that I have on my altar, but you will still want quite a bit of this to use, okay? Because once again, this will be to scatter in your circle, in your sacred space. However, I do recommend and suggest, ideally, that you go ahead and get some wormwood or mugwort or willow to use. There is other herbs that are associated with necromancy, which you could easily look that up online and just look through the list of herbs that are associated with necromancy and see, you know, which ones are easiest for you to obtain and which ones that you feel are most powerful to use. For me personally, I think that wormwood and mugwort are the most powerful ones. But I only have some wormwood right now, so that's what I'm using this time around. So that's basically it. These are all the ingredients that you will need for the ritual. I do want to also sort of give y'all a little bit of introduction to the ritual so that you will know the preparations you need to make as well. So this is the sigil of Hecate in her underworld aspect, and you'll need to draw this on all of your 13 stones, okay? I do also recommend that you will draw this on your spell jar or bag that you're using. So this sigil is representative of Hecate in her underworld aspect. So it represents Hecate Prytania, and it represents basically necromantic magic and mastery in that regard. So I'm going to use this paint pen. It is the color green. You could use green, black, or purple, or red. But it does need to be one of those colors for the symbolism. And basically, you'll just draw directly onto the stones the sigil, okay? So let me pause this for a second. Okay, so I drew the sigil on the stones. This is what you'll need to do. You need to draw the sigil on all of the 13 stones that you're using for this ritual. This is a way to mark them with the underworld energy, with the underworld power, and it marks them to be ready to be transferred, all of the weight and energy and gravity, over to the 13 spirits, 13 witch ancestor spirits that will be coming forward to you to do in your ritual, okay? So make sure that you do that. Gather your 13 rocks, draw the sigil on them. I do recommend that you use green because that color is very symbolic of life force energy. Red as well. But green just has a more eerie vibe. It seems more like underworld energy to me. So that's why I use green. It also just looks really nice and awesome on the rocks. And so what you're going to do is, as far as the pre-ritual setup, you're going to want to find a place in nature, largely to do partially the most important part of this ritual. Find a place in nature. You can choose a graveyard. You could choose, the woods. You could choose anywhere. You could do it in your backyard, okay? Just anywhere outdoors in a natural area that this will not be disturbed. So if you do decide to do this ritual in the woods or a cemetery or something, make sure that you choose a place that's like off the beaten path, that usually won't be disturbed. And you will need to go there and set up these rocks in a circle, okay? So, make it into a circle kind of large enough for you to stand in. That's important as well. And you'll need to have this done prior to the eclipse. So it's very important that you set this up before the eclipse itself, okay? And, excuse me, I recommend that you do this, like go and choose a spot in nature that you're going to do this in, and then only set the stones up there probably like the day before the eclipse, or, something like that, because you don't want these stones to be disturbed or messed with by anybody. So if your spot is private enough, like if it's in your own yard or something, you can set these up immediately. You don't have to wait. You can set up the stones in a big circle of 13 stones, today. If you have the time to gather all these rocks, do the markings, and whatever. You can set them up today if it's going to be in your own yard, or if it's in a place that's private enough that you know and you trust that they won't be disturbed. However, if you're going to do this like in a cemetery or in the woods, that is kind of private and secluded, but you think that someone might come across them if you leave them there all month, for example, then I suggest that you just wait and set up the stones like the day before the ritual or the day before the eclipse, okay? Now, as far as the ritual itself, you do not have to be present in the circle of stones when you do the ritual of creating the spell jar and the actual words that you will say, and the basically the ritual itself, the core ritual itself. You can set up these stones outside somewhere, okay, so that they will absorb the eclipse energy, and then you can do the spell jar and that part of the ritual, in your house or at your own altar and stuff like that, okay? So like I said, this ritual is highly, adaptable to you. You can fit these different things to your situation and how you want to do it. Alternatively, you can perform the entire ritual in the circle of stones, okay? But what is important is that you set up this circle of stones prior to the eclipse. You let them be sitting out overnight during the eclipse. And then you will have to return to that spot and gather all of these stones, or rather dig a hole in the center of the circle and then gather all of the stones and put them into the hole and bury them there. Okay? And there are some steps that, you'll need to do as far as magically. So, for example, the 3 candles that you burn, this needs to be done inside of the stone circle. So you can do this after the eclipse actually has happened, as long as you have the stones sitting out in the circle before the eclipse and during the eclipse. You can return at any point after that and seal the spell, okay? And that is the part where you will need the 3 candles in during that process and during that part. And you will also need to take your spell jar or spell bag to that location during that part of the ritual as well. But once again, I will be sending you all an email with the full instructions typed out and written down for you, and the different alternative ways that you can do this, and all of the details and instructions. So I will be sending that shortly, as soon as I type it up, to send to all of you. But I wanted you to sort of get a vibe of the ritual setup in and of itself, okay? So that you can start preparing for it as soon as possible. Okay, so that's going to be all for this video. Once again, thank you all for participating. I'm very excited for this. I did, once again, I cast this spell already in 2015 during one of the blood moons, and it was amazing. It does require a little bit of labor, because you're going to have to gather these heavy rocks, kind of tote them around, and then dig a hole to bury them. Dig a hole that's deep enough to fit all of the large rocks in and bury them. But it is very much worth it. And it is a little bit of a draining process, but any type of ritual that includes necromancy is draining. Plus, when you add in the physical labor aspect to this, it is, you're going to have to exert yourself a little bit. But it's totally worth it, and it's totally rewarding, and you will get the results from this ritual. Believe me. So, be excited about it. Look forward to it. Start gathering everything that you need. And, yes, I look forward to, sharing in this magic with all of you, and the wonderful, amazing results that we're all going to experience from this work. And to answer some questions you all may have about this work, some questions that have come up already from some of the other participants, you can do this ritual as a beginner. That is fine, because this ritual is safe. There are some certain obligations that you will need to meet, though, okay? Some certain requirements that you need to do, because this is a spiritual contract that you are getting into with these 13 ancestral witch spirits, okay? The spirits will act as your familiars. They will be doing tasks for you. They will be aiding your magic. They will be protecting you. And they'll basically largely just be your familiar spirits and your allies in the spirit realm. So, they will need regular offerings, okay? I recommend that any time that you request their help explicitly, give them an offering of drink and food. And it can be literally anything, as long as it's, edible food and drink. It can be anything. It can be as basic as water and bread, or you can, get elaborate with it and offer them some like savory foods and drinks, okay? But anytime that you ask for these spirits' help, give them an offering, okay? And aside from that, they still will be doing things behind the scenes for you, whether if you ask for help or not. Simple things like protecting you and, giving you good fortune and stuff like that. They'll be doing that whether you ask for it or not. So make sure that you do give them a regular offering, regardless if you ask for help or not with anything in particular. I'd say give them an offering at least once a month in that aspect and in that regard. At the full moons or at the dark moons, give them an offering. And, once again, a food or drink. And aside of that, if you're asking for help with anything in particular, give them an offering when you ask for help as well. That's really basically it as far as obligations to these spirits, as far as fulfilling the contract with these spirits. That's really all they require is offerings. Okay? And, that is important. I don't want to undermine it or underplay it. That is a very important aspect to this ritual. So if you miss giving them offerings or you skip it, they may just leave you, okay? So, in that regard, if you don't fulfill your end of this contract of giving them offerings, then the contract will be broken and they will just leave and this whole spell will sort of be non-existent anymore. Okay, because you failed to do your part of the contract. So that is a very important aspect to this. It is very important that you do that. The spell is not dangerous. The spirits won't turn on you if you don't give them offerings, but they most likely will leave. And so you will have done this entire ritual for nothing. So make sure that you do give them offerings, okay? Regularly. So I had noticed when I cast this spell back in 2015 that, the spirit stayed with me and stayed strong from the initial offerings of the stones, which is what gives them really the powerful physical energy to do physical phenomenon. These stones, the 13 stones that you use, are what gives them that weight and that gravity and that energy to make effects in the physical world, okay? So this is like a big spiritual sacrifice in that regard over to the spirits. And they use this energy slowly over time, okay? And, depending on how much help you're asking for or what you're asking them to do, they're taking away from the weight, the collective weight of these stones, okay? So in that regard, the larger and the heavier stones that you select for this ritual, the more of a reserve of energy that these spirits have to use and call upon. Okay, but it does diminish over time. So I just want to make that clear as well. They're using up this energy over time. Okay, so when I cast the spell in 2015, for me, for the way that I was using this energy, it lasted for about 2 years from the initial stones that I offered. So that's just an example, though. Once again, I do not know how you're going to use this energy. I do not know how many times you're going to request the spirits to do something for you. And every time that you do that, it's going to take away a little bit of this energy from the 13 stones that you choose. And I also don't know how large or small or heavy the stones that you're choosing are. So, gauge it yourself based on the stones that you're using, as far as how much energy they will be having to use and draw from. But also be aware that it will diminish over time from the initial stones. So you will need to recast the spell pretty much at the next blood moon. That does happen. and gather, new stones and all of that over again. But this spell is reusable, so you can use this at every single blood moon if you want to. Blood moons usually happen once every 2 or 3 years anyways. So this spell does seem to last from blood moon to blood moon. Like I told y'all in my other video, I broke the spell last July. So it lasted from 2015 to 2017. So, this is a long-lasting spell, and it is very much worth it. It is a big spell because you have to do some labor and you have to put in some effort and work, but it's totally worth it, and it's long-lasting. So the effort that you're putting into this spell will pay off in the end, okay? So I just wanted to also include that note, okay? So once again, thank you. And that concludes this video. Hail to the witches, hail Hecate, and blessed be.